Turkey is one of the largest oil consumers in the world, ranking 22nd in 2021. The country's oil consumption has increased dramatically since 1990, when it was at just 22.9 million metric tons. This growth was driven by rapid economic and population expansion, as well as a heavy dependency on oil imports, especially for transportation and industry. According to the International Energy Agency, IA, Turkey's oil consumption reached almost 45 million metric tons in 2021, accounting for about 1% of the world's total consumption of 97 million barrels per day. This means that Turkey consumes 0.50 gallons of oil per capita every day, or 181 gallons per capita per year. Turkey has pursued a restructuring of its energy system with the aim of rationalizing energy demand growth, lowering energy prices for consumers, and slowing the pace of import growth. These reforms have included measures targeted at modernization, liberalization, and increased domestic production capacity, including through more private and foreign investments. However, Turkey still faces significant challenges in ensuring its energy security and reducing its carbon footprint. The country has a heavy dependency on oil imports, especially from Iraq and Iran, which exposes it to geopolitical risks and price volatility. Moreover, Turkey's oil consumption contributes to its greenhouse gas emissions, which have increased by 133% since 1990. To address these challenges, Turkey has taken steps to diversify its energy mix and increase its use of renewable and nuclear energy sources. The commissioning of Turkey's first nuclear power facility in 2023 will further reduce its reliance on fossil fuels. Turkey has also seen impressive growth in renewable electricity generation, which tripled in the past decade. However, more efforts are needed to decarbonize the transport and industry sectors, which account for most of the oil consumption in Turkey. Turkey is a country with a high demand for oil, but a low domestic production capacity. According to the International Energy Agency, IA, Turkey consumed almost 45 million metric tons of oil in 2021, but produced only 3.2 million tons, which means that its production met only 7.1% of its consumption. This makes Turkey heavily dependent on oil imports from various sources, mainly from the Middle East and Russia. Turkey's oil consumption has increased dramatically since 1990, when it was only 22.9 million metric tons. This is due to the rapid economic and population growth in the past 2 decades, which have driven up the demand for energy in various sectors, such as transportation, industry, and electricity generation. Turkey has tried to diversify its energy mix by increasing the share of renewable and nuclear energy, but fossil fuels still dominate its energy system. Turkey's oil production, on the other hand, has remained relatively stable and low in the past decade, averaging around 60,000 barrels per day. Most of Turkey's proved oil reserves are located in the southeast and northwest regions of the country, but they are not sufficient to meet its domestic needs. Turkey has also invested in exploration and production activities in offshore areas, such as the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, but these have not yielded significant results yet. As a result of this mismatch between production and consumption, Turkey has to spend a large amount of money on energy imports every year. According to the IA, Turkey's net oil import bill was over $40 billion in 2019, which accounted for about 20% of its total import expenditure and 4% of its gross domestic product (GDP). This makes Turkey vulnerable to fluctuations in global oil prices and geopolitical risks in its supplier countries. To reduce its dependence on oil imports and improve its energy security, Turkey has pursued several strategies, such as increasing energy efficiency, promoting domestic production and diversification of supply sources and routes, developing strategic storage facilities, and strengthening regional cooperation. However, these efforts face many challenges and limitations, such as high costs, environmental concerns, regulatory barriers, and political tensions. Therefore, Turkey's oil demand is likely to remain high and exceed its domestic production capacity for the foreseeable future. Turkey is one of the largest oil consumers in the world, ranking 22nd in 2021, with a consumption of almost 45 million metric tons. However, Turkey's domestic oil production is very low, meeting only 7% of its demand. Therefore, Turkey relies heavily on oil imports from various sources, mainly from the Middle East and Russia. Turkey's growing oil demand affects the global crude oil prices and supply in several ways. First, Turkey's demand contributes to the overall global oil demand, which has been recovering from the sharp decline caused by the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020. According to the International Energy Agency, IA, global oil demand is expected to increase by 5.7 million barrels per day, B/D, in 2021 and by another 3.1 million barrels per day in 2022. Turkey's oil demand is projected to grow by 4.6% in 2021 and by 3.9% in 2022, adding to the upward pressure on oil prices. Second, Turkey's demand influences the decisions of the major oil-producing countries that form the alliance known as OPEC+. OPEC+ consists of the members of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, and several non-OPEC countries, such as Russia, Mexico, and Kazakhstan. OPEC+ controls about 40% of the global oil supply and has the ability to adjust its production levels to balance the market and stabilize prices. In April 2020, OPEC+ agreed to reduce its output by an initial 9.7 million barrels per day in response to the collapse of oil demand and prices due to the pandemic. Since then, OPEC+ has gradually eased its production cuts as the market conditions improved. In July 2021, OPEC+ reached a new agreement to increase its output by 400,000 barrels per day each month starting from August 2021 until the end of the current agreement period in April 2022. This agreement aims to meet the rising global oil demand while avoiding a supply glut or a price spike. Third, Turkey's demand affects the geopolitical dynamics and tensions in the region where it is located. Turkey is situated at a strategic crossroads between Europe, Asia, and Africa, and has access to important oil and gas transit routes such as the Bosphorus Strait, the Dardanelles Strait, and several pipelines. Turkey also has interests and involvement in several conflicts and disputes in its neighboring countries, such as Syria, Iraq, Iran, Libya, and Azerbaijan. These conflicts and disputes can have implications for the security and stability of oil supply and transportation in the region, as well as for Turkey's relations with other major oil producers and consumers. For example, Turkey has been supporting Azerbaijan in its conflict with Armenia over the Nagorno-Karabakh region, which is close to some of Azerbaijan's oil fields and pipelines. Turkey has also been opposing Iran's nuclear program and sanctions relief, which could affect Iran's oil exports and influence in the region. Furthermore, Turkey has been competing with Greece and Cyprus over maritime boundaries and energy resources in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. In conclusion, Turkey's growing oil demand has significant impacts on the global crude oil prices and supply, especially in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, the OPEC+ agreement, and the geopolitical tensions in the region. Turkey's demand drives up global oil demand and prices, influences OPEC+ as production decisions, and affects regional security and stability.